What would you do if standing up for a stranger cost you everything you had, but gave you everything you never knew you needed? She was just a waitress trying to survive. He was a mysterious man hiding in plain sight. And two corrupt cops were about to learn that sometimes the quietest people have the loudest courage. This is the story of how one woman's 5 words changed an entire town forever. But I need to warn you, by the end of this story, you're going to question whether you would have had the courage to do what she did. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you believe in heroes again. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Sometimes the biggest moments in our lives start on the most ordinary days. Let me tell you about Rachel Bennett. She was 28 years old, working as a waitress in a small cafe called Sunrise Corner, right in the heart of Riverside, a quiet town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Rachel wasn't anyone special, at least that's what she would tell you. Every morning, she'd tie her hair back, put on her simple blue apron over her white shirt, and head to work. The cafe smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls, the kind of smell that makes you feel safe, She'd pour coffee for the same people every day, remember how they liked their eggs, ask about their kids. She was the kind of person who made you feel seen. But Rachel was carrying a heavy load. Her mother was sick, really sick, and the medical bills were piling up like autumn leaves. Her younger brother, Danny, was only 14, still in school, still needing someone to look up to. Rachel's tips paid for everything. The rent, the groceries, the medicine. Some nights she'd count her money 3 times, hoping the numbers would somehow add up differently. It was a Thursday afternoon, nothing special about it. The sun was streaming through the cafe windows, making patterns on the checkered floor. The radio played soft music in the background. Rachel moved between tables with practiced ease, balancing plates, refilling cups, always with that gentle smile on her face even when her feet were aching. That's when she noticed him. A man sitting alone in the corner booth, hunched over a cup of black coffee. He wore an old jacket, a baseball cap pulled low, hiding most of his face. There was something about the way he sat, so still, so quiet, like he was trying to disappear into the worn leather seat. Rachel had seen him before, coming in every few days, always alone, always polite but never really talking. She figured he was just passing through town, maybe someone with troubles of his own. The cafe was busy that day. Families shared meals, friends laughed over dessert, the usual rhythm of small-town life. Rachel was behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine, when she heard the door chime ring. 2 police officers walked in, and something about the way they entered made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Officer Brooks was first, a big man with a loud voice and an attitude that filled the room. His partner, Officer Hayes, followed behind with a smirk on his face like he knew a joke no one else did. The cafe got quieter. You know that feeling when something's about to happen and everyone senses it? That's what it felt like. Rachel watched as the officers scanned the room, their eyes landing on the man in the corner booth. They exchanged a look, the kind of look that said they'd found what they were looking for, and started walking toward him. Her stomach tightened. She'd lived in Riverside her whole life, and she knew these officers. They had a reputation for pushing people around, especially people who couldn't push back. Officer Brooks stopped at the booth, his shadow falling across the table. His voice cut through the cafe's gentle atmosphere like a knife. "Hey, you got identification?" he demanded, his hand resting on his belt in that way that's supposed to intimidate. The man didn't look up right away. He just kept staring into his coffee cup like maybe if he stayed still enough, this would all go away. But it wouldn't. Officer Hayes leaned in, his voice sharp and mocking. "We're talking to you. Don't make this difficult." Every head in the cafe turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Rachel's heart started beating faster. She glanced at her boss, George, who was manning the grill. He caught her eye and gave a small shake of his head. "Stay out of it," his look said. "Don't get involved." The man finally spoke, his voice so quiet Rachel almost didn't hear it. "I'm just having coffee. I'm not causing any trouble." Officer Brooks laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was cold, mean. "Not causing trouble? You look like trouble to me. Show us your ID, or we're taking you down to the station." The man's hands tightened around his coffee mug, his knuckles turning white, but he didn't move. He didn't reach for his wallet. He just sat there, and Rachel could see he was scared, trying not to show it but scared all the same. Something inside Rachel shifted in that moment. She thought about all the times she'd seen people get pushed around in this town. All the times she'd stayed quiet because it was safer that way. She thought about her mother fighting to get better, about Danny needing to see that someone could stand up for what's right. Her hands were shaking, but she set down her cleaning cloth and started walking toward the booth. George called her name softly, a warning, but she didn't stop. Every step felt heavy, like walking through water, but she kept going. "Officers," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "He's just a customer. He paid for his coffee like everyone else. He's not bothering anyone." Officer Brooks turned to look at her, his eyes narrowing. "This doesn't concern you, Rachel. Go back to pouring coffee." But Rachel didn't move. She couldn't. Not anymore. Have you ever felt your heart pounding so hard you thought everyone around you could hear it? That's how Rachel felt standing there, facing those two officers who suddenly seemed a lot bigger than they had a moment ago. The whole cafe was watching now, everyone frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Rachel took a breath and stepped closer. "It does concern me," she said, and she was surprised by how clear her voice sounded. "This is where I work, these are my customers, and he's not doing anything wrong. Why are you bothering him?" Officer Hayes folded his arms across his chest, that smirk still on his face. "Your cafe? Last time I checked, you just serve the food here. How about you mind your business and let us do our job?" The words stung. They were meant to make her feel small, unimportant. And for a second, they almost worked. Rachel felt her confidence waver. Who was she to stand up to police officers? She was just a waitress, struggling to pay bills, nobody special. But then she looked at the man in the booth, really looked at him, and saw the fear in his eyes. Saw how he'd shrunk into himself, waiting for whatever came next. "I'm not going anywhere," Rachel said, louder this time. Her hands found her hips, anchoring herself. "If you have a real reason to question him, then say it. Otherwise, let the man drink his coffee in peace." A murmur ran through the cafe. A few people nodded. Others leaned forward in their seats. Rachel could feel the energy in the room shifting, could sense people waking up to what was happening. Officer Brooks's face turned red. He took a step toward Rachel, using his size to intimidate her. "You're making a big mistake, Bennett. You really want to do this? You want to end up on the wrong side of us?" Rachel's heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy, but she didn't back down. She thought about her mother, lying in that hospital bed, fighting every single day. She thought about Danny, who needed to believe that good people existed, that someone would stand up when things got hard. "I'm not making a mistake," Rachel said, and her voice rang out clear across the cafe. "You're the ones picking on someone who hasn't done anything to you. That's not what this town is supposed to be about. That's not right." The man in the booth shifted, pulling his cap down lower. "It's okay," he said quietly, like he was trying to calm things down, trying to protect her. "I'll just go. It's fine." But Rachel shook her head. "No, you stay right where you are. You have just as much right to be here as anyone else." She turned back to the officers, meeting their eyes. "If you want to make someone leave, it's not going to be him." The silence in the cafe was so thick you could almost touch it. Everyone was holding their breath. Officer Brooks and Officer Hayes looked at each other, and for the first time, Rachel saw something flicker in their faces. Uncertainty. They'd expected everyone to just watch, to let them do whatever they wanted. They hadn't expected anyone to speak up. Then a voice broke the silence. Mrs. Patterson, an older woman who'd been coming to Sunrise Corner for 20 years, spoke up from her table by the window. "She's right. Leave the man alone. He's not bothering anybody." Another voice joined in, this time from the back of the cafe. "Yeah, what did he even do?" More people started nodding, murmuring their agreement. A teenager in the corner had his phone out, recording everything. Officer Brooks noticed and his jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he said, pointing at Rachel. His voice was low and threatening. "You're going to regret this." Then he jerked his head at Officer Hayes, and they turned and walked out of the cafe. The door slammed behind them, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Some people started clapping. Others rushed over to Rachel, asking if she was okay, telling her she was brave. Rachel's legs felt like they might give out. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. She turned to the man in the booth, who was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Are you okay?" she asked him. He nodded slowly, then said in that quiet voice of his, "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." Rachel managed a small smile even though her stomach was still churning with adrenaline and fear. "Yes, I did. Nobody should be treated like that." As she walked back toward the counter, her legs unsteady. She noticed the teenager with the phone giving her a thumbs up. "That was amazing," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "This is definitely going online." Rachel frowned, not really understanding what he meant, but she didn't have time to think about it. Customers were calling her over, patting her shoulder, telling her they'd never seen anything like that. George, her boss, pulled her aside, his face serious. "Rachel, you know they're going to come after you for this," he said quietly. She nodded. She knew. But somehow knowing didn't change anything. The man in the booth finished his coffee, left some money on the table, and quietly slipped out the door. Rachel watched him go, wondering who he really was, why the officers had targeted him. There was something about him, something that felt important, but she couldn't put her finger on it. As the afternoon wore on and the excitement died down, Rachel went back to work, pouring coffee, taking orders, cleaning tables. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. She'd stood up when it mattered, and now there was no going back. When her shift finally ended and she locked up the cafe, the sun was setting, painting Riverside in shades of orange and pink. Rachel stood there for a moment, looking at the quiet street, and felt a strange mix of pride and fear. She'd done the right thing. She knew she had. But what would it cost her? You ever notice how fast news travels in a small town? Well, in the age of the internet, it travels even faster. Rachel woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing like an angry bee. At first, she thought something was wrong, maybe an emergency. But when she picked it up, she saw dozens of notifications, texts from numbers she didn't recognize, emails from strangers. Danny burst into her room, his eyes wide with excitement and worry. "Rachel, you need to see this," he said, shoving his phone in her face. There on the screen was a video, shaky and filmed from someone's table, but clear enough. It showed her standing up to Officer Brooks and Officer Hayes, her voice strong and unwavering. "If you want to make someone leave, it's not going to be him," her recorded voice said. Below the video, a hashtag was spreading like wildfire. Hashtag Stand With Rachel. Thousands of likes. Thousands of shares. People from all over the country were watching her, commenting, calling her brave, calling her a hero. But not everyone was kind. Rachel scrolled through the comments, her stomach sinking. "Troublemaker," one said. "She's going to pay for this," said another. "Disrespecting law enforcement," a third one read. Rachel handed the phone back to Danny, trying to laugh it off, but her hands were shaking. "It's just the internet," she said. "It'll blow over." But it didn't blow over. As she got ready for work, pulling on her blue apron, tying back her hair, she felt different. Exposed. Like she'd stepped into a spotlight she hadn't asked for and couldn't turn off. At Sunrise Corner, things were strange. Some customers stared at her like she was a celebrity. A few asked to take photos with her. One man even asked her to sign his napkin. But others avoided her eyes, whispering to each other when they thought she wasn't listening. The warm, familiar atmosphere of the cafe felt different now, charged with something Rachel didn't quite understand. George pulled her aside during the morning rush. His face was serious, worried. "The officers came by this morning, before you got here," he said quietly. "They didn't say much, but Rachel, they're watching. Be careful." Over the next few days, the video kept spreading. News vans showed up in Riverside, reporters waiting outside the cafe with microphones and cameras. They called out questions as Rachel tried to get to work. "Rachel, what made you stand up to the police? Are you scared of what might happen? Do you have a message for others?" She kept her answers short, her heart pounding every time. "I just did what felt right," she'd say, then hurry inside. But the backlash started to get scary. One night, Rachel came home to find eggs splattered all over her car, the yolk dried and crusty in the evening air. Another time, someone spray-painted "Traitor" on the side of Sunrise Corner. George scrubbed it off before opening, but Rachel saw it, and it made her chest feel tight. Threatening notes started showing up, slipped under the cafe door, left on her car windshield. One said, "You should have kept your mouth shut." Another, more frightening, read, "People who don't respect the badge don't deserve respect." Rachel found herself crying one night in her small kitchen, her hands trembling as she read the messages. Danny found her there and wrapped his arms around her. "You're not alone," he said fiercely. "We'll get through this together." But it wasn't just strangers. Some people in Riverside, people Rachel had known her whole life, turned cold. Mrs. Murphy, who ran the flower shop, stopped saying hello. The police chief gave a statement on the local news, calling what happened a misunderstanding and defending his officers. Rachel watched it with her mother, who was home from the hospital now, but still weak. "Maybe I made a mistake," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "Maybe I should have just stayed quiet." Her mother took her hand, squeezing it with what little strength she had. "No, baby. You did the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing. But that doesn't make it wrong." The cafe's business started to slow down. Some regulars stopped coming, afraid of being associated with Rachel, afraid of attracting attention. George's worried expression got deeper with each passing day. Rachel saw the bills piling up on his desk and felt a wave of guilt. Her stand had consequences, not just for her, but for everyone around her. But then, something unexpected started happening. One morning, a delivery truck pulled up to Sunrise Corner. A man in overalls unloaded boxes of brand new kitchen equipment, professional-grade pots and pans, even a beautiful new coffee machine. "Delivery for Rachel Bennett," he said, handing her a clipboard to sign. Rachel stared at the boxes, confused. "I didn't order these." The delivery man shrugged. "Already paid for. There's a note." The note was simple, typed on plain paper with no signature. "Keep standing tall. Someone believes in you." Rachel looked at George, who was just as confused as she was. "Who would do this?" she whispered. A few days later, another surprise. An envelope arrived at Rachel's house with a cashier's check inside, enough to cover 3 months of her mother's medical bills. No name, no return address, just another typed note. "For your family. You're not alone." Rachel sat on her front step, holding that check, tears streaming down her face. Danny sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Someone out there is watching out for you," he said. The mysterious gifts kept coming. Groceries appeared on their doorstep. When someone slashed Rachel's tires one night, a local mechanic showed up the next morning with 4 new ones, refusing to tell her who paid for them. Each gift felt like a hand reaching through the darkness, pulling her back from the edge. Online, #StandWithRachel was growing into something bigger than just a viral video. People started sharing their own stories, times when they'd stood up to bullies, times when they'd spoken out against injustice. A college student across the country started a fundraiser for Rachel's family. And within days, thousands of dollars poured in from strangers who'd never met her but believed in what she'd done. Letters arrived at the cafe, forwarded from the news stations. A woman from Texas wrote, "I was afraid to speak up at work when I saw something wrong. Your courage inspired me to finally say something. Thank you." A man from Michigan sent a drawing his daughter made, showing Rachel as a superhero with a coffee pot in one hand and a cape flowing behind her. But the pressure didn't ease. Officer Brooks and Officer Hayes were still around, their patrol car circling the cafe like a shark. Rachel would see them watching through the window, their faces hard and cold. Every time the door chimed, her heart would jump, wondering if this was the moment they'd find a reason to arrest her. The quiet man from the booth never came back, and Rachel couldn't stop thinking about him. Who was he? Why had the officers really targeted him? His whispered "thank you" echoed in her mind during sleepless nights. One evening, as Rachel was closing up the cafe, wiping down tables in the dim light, she noticed someone watching from across the street. Her heart raced, fear flooding through her. But as the figure stepped into the streetlight, she realized it was just a kid, maybe 9 or 10 years old. The child ran up to the window and taped something to the glass before running away. Rachel walked over and looked at what had been left. It was a crayon drawing, simple but heartfelt. It showed a stick figure in a blue apron, standing tall, with the words, "My hero," written in shaky letters. Rachel carefully peeled the drawing from the window and held it in her hands, her vision blurring with tears. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket, right over her heart. Whatever was coming, whatever storm she'd have to face, she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't alone. And she wasn't backing down. Sometimes the answers we're looking for come from the places we least expect. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, about 2 weeks after everything started, when Rachel noticed him again. The man from the corner booth. He was back, sitting in the same spot, wearing the same worn jacket and baseball cap pulled low. Rachel's hands froze on the coffee pot she was holding. Her heart started racing, not from fear this time, but from curiosity and something else, something like hope. She set the pot down, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked over to his table. "You came back," she said softly. The man looked up, and for the first time, she really saw his face. He had tired eyes, the kind that carry stories, but they were kind eyes. Warm. He gave her a small smile. "I owe you an explanation," he said. And a thank you. Can we talk? Rachel glanced at George, who nodded his approval. She slid into the booth across from the stranger, her hands folded on the table, waiting. My name is William Cross, the man said, his voice quiet but steady. And I need you to understand something. I'm not just some drifter passing through town. Rachel listened as William told her his story, and with every word, her understanding of everything shifted. William Cross was a tech inventor, he explained, someone who'd created software that had changed the way hospitals managed patient care. He'd made millions, then billions from his work. But 5 years ago, his wife died suddenly, and everything changed. I had all this money, all this success, but none of it meant anything without her, William said, his voice thick with emotion. We had a son, Ben. He was only 8 when we lost her. I realized I was raising him in a world full of cameras and attention, and people who wanted something from us. So I walked away from it all. He'd moved to Riverside to give Ben a normal childhood, William explained. A place where they could just be regular people, where Ben could go to school without security guards, where William could grab a cup of coffee without being recognized. He'd been living quietly for 3 years, and most people in town had no idea who he really was. But those officers, Brooks and Hayes, they figured it out somehow, William continued, his jaw tightening. They recognized me that day. They weren't trying to arrest me for anything. They were trying to shake me down, imply that maybe they'd keep my secret safe for the right price. Rachel's eyes widened. They were trying to blackmail you? William nodded. And then you stepped in. You didn't know who I was, didn't know if I was important or not. You just saw someone being treated unfairly, and you stood up. Do you know how rare that is? Rachel didn't know what to say. Her throat felt tight. William reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, setting it on the table between them. I'm the one who's been sending you the gifts, he said. The equipment, the money for your mother's bills, all of it. But I want to do more. I want to help you keep this place alive, keep this community alive. He pushed the folder toward her. This is an offer to buy Sunrise Corner from George, with the condition that you become the owner and manager. I'll provide funds for renovations, for whatever you need. No strings attached. You've shown that you know how to bring people together, how to stand up for what matters. This town needs that. You need that. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were documents, contracts, numbers that made her dizzy. It was too much, too sudden. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for me? William's eyes got misty. Because my son Ben, he saw that video of you standing up to those officers. He watched it over and over. And he said to me, Dad, that lady is a real hero. She's brave like Mom was brave. You reminded him and me what courage looks like. That's worth more than any amount of money. Rachel felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She thought about her mother, about Danny, about all the people who'd sent her letters and drawings and messages of support. She thought about that kid's crayon drawing in her apron pocket. I don't know if I can do this, she said honestly. I'm just a waitress. I don't know how to run a business. William smiled gently. You stood up to corrupt police officers in front of a room full of people who were too afraid to move. You faced death threats and kept showing up to work every day. You've inspired people across the country to be braver. Rachel, you're already doing the hard part. The rest? That's just paperwork and learning as you go. Over the next week, Rachel talked it over with everyone, her mother, Danny, even George, who admitted that he'd been thinking about retirement anyway and would be honored to see Rachel take over. She barely slept, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. Finally, on a Sunday evening, sitting at her mother's bedside while Danny did his homework at the kitchen table, Rachel made her decision. I'm going to do it, she said out loud, and just saying the words made them feel real. Her mother squeezed her hand, tears of pride in her eyes. You're going to do amazing things, baby. I know it. Rachel signed the papers on a Monday morning, her hand shaking as she wrote her name. William was there, along with his lawyer, and when it was done, he shook her hand firmly. The place is yours, he said. What are you going to name it? Rachel had been thinking about this. She wanted something that captured what she'd learned, what this whole experience had taught her. Heart's home, she said. Because that's what it should be. A home for people's hearts. William smiled. Perfect. Renovations started almost immediately. New paint, new tables, a proper espresso machine that didn't break down every other day. But Rachel made sure to keep the things that mattered, the checkered floor, the big windows, the cozy booths where people had been having conversations for decades. But not everyone was happy about the changes. Carl Thompson, who owned another cafe across town called Thompson's Place, started spreading rumors. He told people that Rachel was a fake, that she'd staged the whole thing with the officers for attention, that the money came from some shady deal. He even paid some teenagers to throw rocks through Hart's home's windows one night. Rachel stood in the cafe the next morning, sweeping up broken glass, her jaw set with determination. She wasn't going to let Carl or anyone else tear down what she was building. You know what they say about the darkest hour being just before dawn? Well, Rachel was about to discover just how true that could be. As Hart's home started to take shape, with fresh paint on the walls and new menus being printed, Rachel made some decisions that surprised people. There was a homeless man named Victor who'd been living behind the old Riverside grocery store. Rachel had seen him around, always polite, always keeping to himself. One day, she walked up to him with a proposition. "Victor, I need someone in the kitchen," she said directly. "Someone who's not afraid of hard work. You interested?" Victor looked at her like she was crazy. "Ma'am, I haven't had a real job in 5 years. Why would you trust me?" Rachel smiled. "Because everyone deserves a chance. And because I think you've got more to offer than you know." Victor became one of Hart's home's best employees, showing up early, staying late, his smile growing wider with each passing week. Watching him transform, seeing his confidence return, that's when Rachel knew she was building something that mattered. William's son Ben started coming by after school. He was 12 now, a quiet kid with a sketchbook always tucked under his arm. He'd sit in the corner booth, his father's old spot, and draw. One day, he showed Rachel what he'd been working on, a mural design for the cafe's wall. "It's you," Ben explained, showing her the sketch. "Standing in front of the cafe, with all the people of Riverside around you. I call it where hearts meet." Rachel's throat tightened with emotion. "Ben, this is beautiful. Would you paint it for us?" Over the next month, Ben painted that mural, and it became the heart of Hart's home. People would come just to see it, to take photos in front of it. It showed Rachel in her blue apron, but she wasn't alone. Around her were faces of all kinds, young and old, different colors and backgrounds, all coming together. The town started to shift. People who'd been afraid to speak up about things that bothered them started finding their voices. Mrs. Patterson organized a town hall meeting to discuss police accountability. Other business owners started treating their employees better, inspired by how Rachel valued Victor and the rest of her staff. But Carl Thompson wasn't finished. He bribed a health inspector to come after Hart's home, looking for any violation he could find to shut them down. The inspector showed up unannounced, his clipboard ready, his expression sour. Rachel didn't panic. She walked him through every inch of the cafe, showing him the immaculate kitchen, the properly stored food, the clean facilities. After 2 hours, the inspector couldn't find a single thing wrong. As he left, muttering under his breath, Rachel allowed herself a small smile of victory. Word got around about Carl's attempted sabotage, and the town responded in a way he never expected. His own customers started leaving, uncomfortable with his tactics. Meanwhile, Hart's home was packed every single day. The grand opening of the renovated Hart's home was on a Saturday in October. The whole town showed up. Rachel's mother cut the ribbon, strong enough now to stand on her own, her eyes shining with pride. Danny managed the social media, posting photos and keeping #StandWithRachel trending. Victor worked the kitchen like a professional chef, his hands steady and sure. William and Ben were there, standing quietly to the side, watching it all with smiles on their faces. At one point, Ben ran up to Rachel and handed her a drawing. It showed Hart's home glowing like a lighthouse with the words "home" written at the bottom. Rachel hugged him tight. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. "You believed in yourself," Ben said simply. "That's what heroes do." Months passed, and Hart's home became the center of Riverside's community. On Sunday mornings, families came for brunch. On Tuesday evenings, a local book club met in the corner. High school students studied there, elderly folks played cards, young mothers brought their babies for coffee and conversation. Rachel hired more staff, always giving chances to people others had overlooked. A single mom who'd been struggling to find work. A veteran with PTSD who needed a supportive environment. Each person brought something special to Hart's home, and Rachel made sure they knew they were valued. Officer Brooks and Officer Hayes? They were investigated after several other complaints came to light. Brooks was fired, Hayes suspended. The new police chief made a public apology to William and to Rachel, promising reforms. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, a local news team came to do a follow-up story. They interviewed Rachel behind the counter of Hart's home, with Ben's mural glowing behind her. The reporter asked, "What would you say to people who are afraid to stand up when they see something wrong?" Rachel thought carefully before answering. "I'd say that I was scared too. I'm still scared sometimes. But I learned that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about deciding that some things matter more than fear. Every single person has the power to make a difference, even if it's just in one moment, in one small cafe, in one small town." The story aired that night, and #StandWithRachel trended again, this time with photos of Hart's home, of Victor smiling in the kitchen, of Ben's mural, of the community that had grown around one woman's decision to speak up. Letters poured in from all over the world. A woman in Japan wrote that Rachel's story inspired her to report workplace harassment she'd been enduring. A man in Brazil said he'd started a community cafe based on Rachel's model, hiring people who needed second chances. A teenager in Australia wrote that Rachel taught her that standing up to bullies was possible. On a quiet Tuesday evening, 6 months after everything began, Rachel stood in Hart's home after closing. The cafe was empty, clean, ready for tomorrow. She walked over to Ben's mural and placed her hand on it, feeling the texture of the paint, seeing her own face staring back at her. She wasn't the same person who'd been pouring coffee 6 months ago. She was stronger now, more sure of herself. But she was also more humble, more aware of how many people had lifted her up when she could have fallen. Danny came in through the back door, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Rachel smiled at her brother. "Yeah, let's go home." As they walked out together, Rachel locked the door and looked at the sign above it. Hart's home, where everyone belongs. Tomorrow, she'd wake up and do it all again. Pour coffee, make people smile, stand up for what's right. Because that's what this story is really about, isn't it? It's not about being perfect or fearless, or having all the answers. It's about deciding that when you see something wrong, you won't just look away. It's about understanding that your voice matters, that your actions ripple out in ways you can't always see. Rachel learned that one moment of courage can change everything. Not just for yourself, but for your whole community, for people you'll never meet, for kids like Ben who need to see that heroes are real and they look like ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So here's the question I want to leave with you. What's your moment going to be? When will you stand up, speak out, choose courage over comfort? Because somewhere, someone is waiting for a person like you to show them that standing up is possible. That person might be sitting in a corner booth right now, hoping someone will see them. Will you be the one who does? If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what we're capable of when we choose courage. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what's one brave thing you're going to do this week?